Hello, everybody. This is John. Welcome to the Ag Weather Outlook for May 7th, 2017. Well, as many of you know, it's been a very active week across, especially parts of the central and to the eastern corn belt. But it is spring. We haven't had one of these really widespread rain events. It's been pretty quiet up to now. Now, certainly this was more than normal, but it has been pretty quiet. It's also sort of interesting. We haven't had as much severe weather as far as tornadoes and windstorms and hail, at least over the latter part of April into early May, as we have had heavy rain. So here's a story. Take a look at this. Boy, I tell you, we're looking at 5 inches or more of rain over areas in red. We're looking at 10 inches of rain in purple. So basically, from the Corn Belt's perspective, we're looking at eastern Missouri, actually parts of central and eastern Missouri, the southern half of Illinois, and the southern half of Indiana are really the areas that have been hit hard with this recent rain, especially southern Illinois, right along the Ohio River in Indiana, and then eastern Missouri. Now, we also have quite a bit of more modest rainfall north of that, and that's only 2 inches or more. So as we go north in that area in yellow, not nearly as much. Then we get into the northern Corn Belt, parts of South Dakota, North Dakota, even Minnesota, not as much rain. Same way with Iowa, not as nearly as much rain. Iowa's missed out on this rain event, but there's still been plenty of rain in most of those areas with the exception of the 4 upper Midwest. But again, I want to really focus on this area in red and purple, really dealing with wet fields. The other interesting thing is this area needed a couple more inches of rain at least from a long-term perspective, maybe not from a short-term, but from a long-term. When I looked at more of the deeper soil moisture, we could have used a couple more inches of rain. So maybe a positive during all this flooding and heavy rain is if we get into a dry condition into the hot months in July or August, we might be looking at this rain as recharging some of our soil moisture more in the deeper layers. So might be a positive aspect to it. But like I said, it's been very wet. As far as rain days go, areas in green have experienced a lot of days of measurable rain. Wanted to sort of show you this area here. We've really missed out on this. Haven't been talking about the upper Midwest after winter. Now, a lot of snow over parts of North Dakota. It was sort of active for a while, but that's really quieted down. Now, the big reason we had all this wet weather, we had a boundary between cold air and warmer air, and you can see now that the cooler air has pushed in. That's the area of blue, and that's quieted things down for now. The boundary right now is pushed off into the eastern U.S. But the result from all this is look at this 1 week change in soil moisture. Tremendous change in soil moisture over Missouri, most of Illinois, most of Indiana, good part of Ohio. Then, like I said, you get into Iowa. You see that shading of white. Not a whole lot of change there. And then North Dakota and South Dakota, parts of surrounding states, that brown is saying it's drying out in that area. But the big story is right in this area here, really have increased the soil moisture. And you can see the current soil moisture here, especially areas of the blue. That's where I think good indication of where fields are quite soggy and we need some drying out. So we definitely have adequate soil moisture, with the exception of maybe the Dakotas, adequate soil moisture heading into the growing season. That's the positive. The negative is we have a lot of wet areas that need to dry out. I think I got some good news for you for that. But because of all the clouds and rain, the temperature, soil temperature, the upper soil temperature has been slow to warm up here. You can see I had to look at this again and sort of make sure I had the right image because it looks so much similar to last week. And you can see soils just aren't warming up all that much because the temperatures haven't been warming all that much. And I still think this is going to be fairly slow because we are going to be getting a little bit cooler weather. So if you live along a river, you probably had a concern for flooding, and this is a snapshot of current conditions. Red and purple are the areas where we have the most inundation. Parts of the Mississippi drainage south of St. Louis are running very high, but really anywhere in the red dots are the purple dots, red being moderate flooding, purple being major flooding. We have some issues. Wanted to show you Cape Girardeau. It's not coming in as high as forecast initially. We initially were looking for a near record crest, but still major flooding. So a lot of the key ag areas along the Mississippi River, right now there's a lot of inundation. Once we get into that major flooding, the river's way out of its banks. Okay, as far as the jet stream goes, as we look into this week, here's the 5-day average. And what we're going to be sort of influence our weather is this trough in the eastern U.S. that's dipping the jet stream, and then over the central part, this ridge of high pressure. Now, what we're going to see is some cooler air with this dip and some more normal to above normal air with this ridge of high pressure. So we're going to see this over the next 5 days, really a dividing line. The western Corn Belt a bit above normal, eastern Corn Belt a bit below normal, and maybe even in some cases more than a bit, maybe a little bit more significantly below normal over the far eastern Corn Belt, and the significantly above normal over the far western Corn Belt. Now the good news is, and it's not the best news, but it is good news, is that we're not going to get nearly as much rain as we've seen in the recent past. It'll probably average out below normal, but we're still going to have some, maybe a ½ inch to an inch, maybe even 1.5 inches over some of this area that's very wet. But still, it should still help us in the trend of drying things out a bit. I don't think we'll have enough that's going to really cause too much additional problem, but it's not going to be all that not the best case scenario either. Areas that have been dry are going to generally remain dry, and then we do have a better chance over parts of Kansas of getting more significant rain. So when we look at how the soil moisture is going to change, we see mainly brown, and that's indicating drying soils over a majority of the Corn Belt over the next 7 days. Now, if you look closely, you're going to see these little areas of blue here and there. That's indicating the possibility of still getting some wetter soils in a few spots. That's not really what we want, but overall from the big picture, most areas, for example, eastern Missouri and parts of southern Illinois, parts of Ohio, are trending drier soils. Now we get into the 6 to 10 day range out there. We still have that trough over the eastern U.S. We still have a relatively weak ridge over the middle part of the U.S. So we're looking at temperatures over the eastern Corn Belt, Missouri, Illinois, especially Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, significantly below normal, or at least modestly below normal. Then as we get over to the upper Midwest, a bit above normal. But the trend here, if you look at the primary Corn Belt, is normal to below normal temperatures. And I know we're always worried about temperatures being too hot, but this is a case when they're quite cool, and it's not going to help drying out the soils as much as if we did have normal or above normal temperatures. And it's not going to warm up soils that quick either. We're going to have a reduced increase in soil temperature over the eastern Corn Belt, not only because of the wet soils, but because of the cooler temperatures. Then as we get into the days 11 to 15, look at the pattern here. They're somewhat similar, middle part of the U.S., a ridge of high pressure, and then bookmarked by these troughs. But overall, I see a lot more shading of white, and that's indicating the jet stream's pretty normal, and that is why these trends that we've looked at in the 11 to 15 day don't change, but they moderate. They're much closer to normal. So let's summarize temperature. We're going to go through a period, maybe for the next 10 days, of below normal temperatures over the eastern Corn Belt, above normal over the west. And then as we get into the 11 to 15 day range, these trends are going to continue, but I think they're going to moderate a bit back towards normal. Okay, now this is really important. Here's your precipitation anomalies. Here's week 1. Now, look, I would rather have this yellow in Missouri and a little bit more in this area. And this is showing closer to normal, but still nothing like we saw over the last couple of weeks. And with a little bit of luck, we're going to have some drying this week. Then as we get into week 2, I like what I see as far as this dry anomaly over the eastern Corn Belt. It looks like we could have back-to-back weeks of below normal precipitation over some areas that have been wet, but not all. It looks like there will be some rain in here, and that's going to aggravate the situation in a few spots. So I think I covered all of our main points here. Cooler temperatures, primarily the eastern Corn Belt. Welcome drier conditions, but not all areas, not all times, but overall the trend is drier. And I still think we're going to lag as far as soil temperatures warming up due to the wet soils, the cooler temperatures, especially Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Hope this has been of benefit to you. Again, like I always say, if you have any specific questions, I don't mind taking questions from you, John at bluewateroutlook.com. If I'm helping you as well on your operations, send me an email. I'd like to hear that as well. Things that you like that I'm covering, that helps me make my briefings to you a little bit more targeted. If there are things that I'm not covering that you'd like to hear, let me know about that as well so I can add them. Take care.